Well, welcome to the show, Kate. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Real pleasure.
How did you get started doing podcasting?
Well, to go back, my first chapter business experience is that I was a crisis media litigation expert and media consultant for global law firms. But I
Mhm.
always had this love of television and pop culture. So I moved to Los Angeles from the East Coast, and I just loved being around the entertainment industry. But I worked with lawyers.
Mhm.
So on the side, I started taking improv comedy classes, and I developed this blog that I had for a long time that had a kind of a cult following, and I would do recaps of TV shows. So because of that, I was invited to do a podcast and just chat about Real Housewives. And it occurred to me, like, I'd be really great at this. So I went
Mhm.
to a network. I pitched this idea of a podcast about reality shows. And I want you to know that they were like, do people really watch reality shows? And
Hmm.
that's funny now when I think about it, because there are so many podcasts now that are not even just about reality shows, but some even just focus on one reality show.
Mhm.
And so I said, well, my idea is that I'm going to structure it like a TV show with an opening and a closing, and I'm going to have more than one guest like Johnny Carson would. And at the front end, I'm going to have somebody who makes shows or is on a show. And then in the second episode, I'm going to take somebody from a different part of the world or an industry and have them review something. So it's kind of like a love letter to unscripted TV. I've expanded to not just reality shows, but docuseries and documentaries, because people are consuming content in unscripted in
Mhm.
a different way. They're interested in more than reality shows, but also interested in watching it in different forms. Like, streaming media has totally changed since I started. After I watch a reality show, I'm hungry for a documentary. After a documentary, I'm hungry for a docuseries. It kind of just switches. But I think that the common thread is I'm just interested in people.
Mhm.
I consider myself an incredibly curious person. I mean, my kids would tell you I go to a store and I am there for 2 hours, because I end up talking to the shopkeeper and they're talking to me about their relatives and what they did for a living. And I like to say I suck people into my vortex. I don't let
Mhm.
them out.
I've heard you say that your entry point into reality TV was the Real World.
It was.
And was it the first season, the New York season?
It was a New York season, and I was home on break from school, and I watched a marathon. I went to this extraordinary school for kids from underprivileged families.
Mhm.
So when I watched The Real World, there was something that I related to, this idea of putting people in a living environment and how that
Mhm.
really does so much to help people realize their commonality.
Right.
I had that experience at school, and then I'm at home on break, and I just started watching the marathon, and I just thought, yes, that resonates with me. And then the conversations that they were having, authentic conversations about race, and Norman Corpy, who was
Mhm.
the first person on television to come out and say, I am gay.
Mhm. Mhm.
All of it I found so interesting. I always think that the best unscripted television is when you allow people to see a different pocket of the world. Because when you do that, you ultimately learn not just more about that person and the way they live, but it makes you think about the way that you live and who you are as a person, and
Mhm.
ultimately changes the lens through which you look at not only unscripted TV shows and docuseries and documentaries, but also who you are in your normal life, the way you interact with a coworker or a neighbor or someone that you meet at a dinner party.
Right. Well, and if you think about the evolution of reality TV, how has reality TV evolved?
They are worlds apart. In the Real World was really taking strangers, putting a camera in the loft, and continuously filming for 24 hours straight, and
Mhm.
then taking that footage and culling it down into some stories.
Mhm.
Reality television today, Housewives, they're going to film for maybe 3 months, but there are only a certain amount of days that they're filming and for a certain amount of hours. And they have some sort of idea, a structure to how the season and their singular stories will work. It's not scripted, but they meet with a talent and they say, what's going on in your life a weeks
Mhm.
before they start filming. So it's not like they're showing up and saying, well, shit, what are you doing today? Like, let's go with you to the grocery store. Let's tag along when you go to a parent teacher conference. It's more how we're telling an overarching story about who you are at this place in your life, and then how can we get you at a party with somebody else so that you can have a confrontation. So
Mhm.
it is different, and I think that that's why you see many people hungry for documentaries and docuseries, because a docu-follow is telling a more authentic story about someone's own personal journey. And I
Mhm.
think that also Instagram has kind of propelled us in that direction, because Instagram is all about a curated image. And I think
Mhm.
that people are tired of curated images. They really want to know what makes someone's life, what makes somebody tick. And they want to
Mhm.
see grit and hustle and the story behind the hard work.
Yeah.
And that is why you're going to continue to see more stories that are being bought by networks that have to do with real people and real stories and hard work.
Where do you see yourself going in terms of your involvement with that? I think I heard you say that you are working on a show yourself.
Right.
And can you talk a little bit about what kind of stories you want to see brought to the screen, and maybe how you're involved in some of those?
I definitely see myself producing TV shows. I currently have a couple projects that I'm pitching to networks. And I think the most important stories for me are going to be ones that have to do with women.
Mhm.
I always say the female story is my North Star. I am one of four girls. I am a women's college graduate. I
Mhm.
have four daughters. I have five kids. Four of them are girls. And I am always excited about the opportunity to collaborate with other women and to tell their stories. So I think you can see me doing a lot of things in the female space, but ultimately I'm interested in really fascinating, compelling stories that ultimately help people recognize that we're all interconnected, and we should really amplify voices of people who have an enormously unique point of view.
Mhm. And you mentioned that you have a big family, you have 5
Yeah.
children.
Uh-huh.
Did you come from a big family?
Well, I mean, there are 4 of us, but we're many, many years apart, and I went
Mm.
to boarding school for the underprivileged kids when I was 14, so I not in the same sense that other people would think, like,
Mhm.
yeah, there were siblings, but we didn't really all grow up together. Um,
Mhm.
I, grew up with a dysfunctional family like many people do, so when
Mhm.
my husband and I started a family, for me, it was really about creating the Thanksgiving table of the future. I'm
Mm.
always thinking of who's going to be around this huge table, 20 years from now, and the chatter and the laughter. And so I consider myself building from the ground up. So
Mhm.
we're building the foundation of a family that we hope gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I just like a noisy house. I like a
Yeah.
lot of people around me.
Well, and but it's so interesting that you say that, because so many of us get caught up in what we saw growing up, right? Whatever our
Mhm.
experience was growing up, that becomes an excuse for
Sure.
all sorts of things that happen as you get older. And you seem to have taken a very different take on that. And
Hmm.
almost, if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it almost sounds like you are taking a completely blank page and saying, yes, that was maybe what happened to me, but now it's my choice what happens from here forward. So how do you get that sort of strength? Where does that come from? The strength to do that, and to be self-aware enough that, okay, this is what was the past, but it's my choice what happens moving forward.
Well, I think as a child, I always knew this is not the life I want for myself.
Mm.
And that
Mhm.
those that are around me that are dysfunctional, it doesn't represent me. I'm a
Mhm.
totally different person. And I
Mhm.
always had a sense that, like, I am going to be somebody in this world and make a difference and create something great. So I had that. I think that going to boarding school between 14 and 18 and being around kids that were from every race, creed, demographic instilled a sense in me that I'm a global citizen. And
Mm.
that when my husband and I started a family, we knew that we wanted to have our kids be part of a school and a curriculum that really taught them and reminded them that they're global citizens. So, I mean, it's the little things I think that we're doing to instill that by it may seem simple, but I have 4 little girls and I always bought them different kinds of dolls because I
Mhm.
think a lot of people buy dolls that look exactly like their child.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so it's that or filling their bookshelves with stories of people from all over the world, but for me also stories of very powerful women that have
Mhm.
lived throughout the world.
Mhm.
Um, so it's just little things like that, and I think in the end, I just want them to be really confident kids, and to know that they can always come back to headquarters, that they are very loved and supported,
Mhm.
and another thing is just to really have a good sense of humor because I think that that's really what has carried me through my entire life is to just laugh at things because life deals you a hard deck of cards sometimes. And if you have a good sense of humor, it makes those difficult moments a little bit easier. And also, frankly, it connects you to other people. I
Yeah.
mean, who wants to be around somebody who's like, my life has been amazing? I'll tell you what, nobody. I'm like, you and I can never hang out.
Right. 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 Well, and I think there's something though, Kate, I would love your perspective on this because I'm a Gen Xer. So I grew up at a time where, I used to work at a very large company and I remember the women of, we would get together and if something was upsetting that happened, we would all go like, oh, there's no crying in baseball. That famous line from the Tom
Oh, and
Hanks,
it's so
Gina.
different in this generation because they're like, embrace your anxiety, be
Yes.
open about it. I vacillate between that and a discussion I have with my husband all the time because I think I admire that, but I'm afraid of it.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
I know that the system is not is we are still part of a misogynistic system that
Hmm.
does not support women. I mean, I did not go on maternity leave, 5 children, never took a day of maternity leave because I was basically a consultant, and I knew if I
Hmm.
tell them I'm gonna have a baby,
Yeah.
they will replace me, and there were employment, EEOC, statistics to back that up. Pregnancy
Yep.
discrimination is a real thing, so I never told anybody I was pregnant. I never told anybody that anything was wrong with me at all. It was like show up to work, be the first one there, be the last one to leave, and keep
Hmm.
things to yourself.
Yeah.
So this whole new generation that embraces it, part of me admires it, but part of me is scared for them because I have been part of a system that punishes you.
Hmm.
And so my hope and prayer is that those women that come forward and are free with their mental health
Hmm.
issues or matters of like things that they're fearful about it, that they're not punished for it in the end because of my life experience. I've seen it before. I'm hoping that this is shift making time in our world where
Hmm.
men and women feel emboldened to live authentically and the
Hmm.
structures with which they live support that and
Yeah.
don't um, that's not that's not used as a form of firing them or
Hmm.
demoting them.
Hmm.
And so that's where in the space that I'm right now, where admiration and fear.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think that the younger generations and even Gen Z, right, which are like the guys that, the teenagers now, more so than the millennials, they
Yeah.
have this attitude that, whatever they're feeling and what's going on with them is really something that should be put out there. And I
Yeah.
and there I agree with you. I think that there's definitely a positive to that, but there's also the older person that I am thinks about it as, oh my gosh, like how's this going to come back and bite them in the ass at some point if they're.
Because you've been conditioned in a
Mhm.
system where you were punished, you were
Mhm.
fired, you were
Mhm.
not given a promotion, you were
Right.
looked at as weak.
Yep.
But maybe the system's changing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe we're weeding out the people that have consistently made decisions that punish people like that. I don't
Yeah.
know, it's a great kind of conversation for women right
Yeah.
now.
I agree. And I think it's one of those things that, as women, I would love your perspective on this, but I think there are so many qualities that are intuitive for women, that make more so than men that are now things that are being spotlighted as positive in leadership.
Mm,
Whereas before, even if you think about the 2016 election with Hillary, some of the things that people said, put her down for were things that if you really think about them, they're female qualities. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on what effect you think reality television is having on how people perceive women and what women bring to the table.
Well, I think it's all an ebb and a flow. So I think that reality television in the Trump era was part of the reason of his success was because of reality television, because it democratizes people. It makes them household names and accessible. And I think that that was on the heels of the Instagram culture, and that people want celebrity. They're interested in the life behind a celebrity. And what's interesting is that on Instagram, you have celebrities who are telling their own narratives. So they're posting their own pictures. Like the red carpet is obsolete now because no one, we would have a celebrity walk up and go, "Oh my God, what are you wearing?" But now we already know because they were doing an Instagram video back at their house and they already tagged all their friends, and their makeup artist was taking video when they were doing. So they're having more control of their story, right? And then we see that trickle down into reality television, where you see celebrities who are like Serena Williams did an incredible docu-series on HBO behind becoming a mother and performing as an athlete, and the struggle, for example, of her coach is telling her, "You need to lose weight, stop breastfeeding." And she's like, "I don't want to stop breastfeeding." That would have never happened 10 years ago.
Right.
So I think that reality television and the way that celebrities have kind of taken back their story, people on shows like Intervention or, even some of the shows like Love After Lockup, other people would look at people suffering with addiction or somebody who is in prison and look down on them. But now they have power because they're telling their story. So I think that you're going to see a shift in politics now, that you're going to see more politicians presenting themselves as more humanistic. Like I would assume that you're probably going to see a docu-follow in the next year of a politician, like probably a young politician, to show the burden of being a leader in this crazy climate where it's so bipartisan, and it might humanize the politician and make us rethink the way we look at political leaders and what we think that they should be. So I do think television shifting, but I also think it's an incredibly powerful medium that really can help people tell their story and connect to others.
Right. Well, and it's showing stories of people that you wouldn't have seen otherwise, going back to where we started with the reality TVs, where that all started. You think about also Pedro, that was on The Real World, and he was one of the
absolutely.
I mean, unbelievable.
Bill Clinton said when he died. So he died the night before the finale of that show aired.
I didn't even realize that.
He died the night before. And so he died, and then Bill Clinton did a press conference. And in it, he was talking about Pedro. In the press conference, the President of the United States of America, and he said, Pedro Zamora did more for HIV education than the federal government could have ever done. That was a shift-making moment in our culture.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how these media, like the voice media, will change the trajectory of content that we consume.
Well, I'm grateful to it because I often get frustrated with just the visual platforms like Instagram, because I noticed there was a period of time where I felt like people that were getting the most follows were people who were doing things that I did not find very interesting. Like they posted pictures of like a coffee table with like a vase and filtered with pink in the background. And it was like, aren't they geniuses? I was like, it's a freaking picture. Like, what? So I am grateful for podcasts because there's long form conversations. And so people who have micro interests like myself, reality television, or whatever it is, they have a platform to expound on whatever it is that they love and find an audience that shares in their love. So I like that my show is a place for people who look at television through the lens of like what I call an armchair psychologist,
Mm-hmm.
right? They have their own life experiences and they're
Yes.
looking through our own lens, and they like to look at other people and sit from afar and think about who they are in the world and why they made those decisions. And so I'm
Right.
celebrating the thinkers of the world. I have to say also, and I know that there are a lot of women that are watching and listening, and I want you to know that I was really good at my first job.
Mm-hmm.
I was really
Mm-hmm.
good at it, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not like it got me excited in the morning. It was
Right.
like, okay, I nailed it, but it's like, does this blow my hair back? What
Yeah.
I did love to talk about was unscripted TV. So I
Right.
figured out a way to start this podcast, and I've done it all on my own. I do not have a virtual assistant. I don't have a
Yep.
publicist. I don't have a booker. I have an
Mm.
audio engineer that puts my two segments and my open and close together for me and and puts it out on the hosting network. I do my own research, my writing. I'm watching all the shows. I've done this all myself. I
Yeah.
have been written about in a ton of outlets. I've been at the top of the charts. I have done this all myself. So
Mm-hmm.
everybody else can too.
Right.
And
Right.
that you can find a second chapter in life, and that you
Mm.
can connect with people and you can inspire them in your own way. You
Mm-hmm.
can do it on your own, you can do it by yourself.
Yeah.
And so, life doesn't end when you have a child. I'm still doing this, raising 5 children between
Mm.
11 and 2. And
God, that's
when you have
amazing.
children, you are infinitely more creative, you're better at your
Mm-hmm.
time management, you're more efficient, you're a better
Mm-hmm.
connector, you're a better collaborator. So
Right.
these things can happen and you can do it. And the other thing I found is that definitely in the world of podcasting, that the most collaborative, helpful are women. 2 million podcasts now exist in the world, and it's
Wow.
because people are at home and they're eager for connection
Mm-hmm.
and they're eager for content, and we can create this on our own, and it's just an incredible time to have a voice in this world.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you said that about what people can do, that if and that your perspective is, you want to be able to share these stories, the women's stories. You want to be able to share the, information, like what you engage with, which is unscripted television, and bring that to people. And that's your interest and passion, and that someone else's interest and passion could be the thing that drives them. I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear how you feel this will all change once the pandemic, people start to emerge. How will these change once people start to emerge from the pandemic, do you think?
Well, you have to factor in too that when people went into the pandemic, they're not in their car driving.
Mm-hmm.
So you lost a bunch of people because they're in the thick of their kids or work or whatever, and you lost those listeners, but you
Mm-hmm.
gained the people that are at home too.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, I think that you're going to have even more listens once we leave the pandemic, because you've grabbed the audience that were at home, and now those people are going to go back to work and they're going to want to listen to something on their commute. I listened to a podcast or a Clubhouse room yesterday. No, Tuesday. Sorry, Tuesday. There was a Sports Illustrated cover story about baseball players that had come forward with their mental health problems.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm scrolling through Clubhouse. I see a friend is in a Clubhouse room. I jump in, and this baseball player is talking about the Sports Illustrated article. Go and read it quickly. Ask him a question and said, "I'd love to have you on my show." So I listened to that on a Tuesday. I interviewed him yesterday. He's on my show Friday.
Wow.
Baseball player who in the Sports Illustrated article, and now I'm interested in maybe doing a television project with him. And that's all from just being in a Clubhouse room.
Unbelievable.
I made a connection to a network executive because I was in a Clubhouse room with them, and I'm
Mm.
pitching another idea to him.
Wow. Well, so your feeling is that Clubhouse, you said podcasting, you think will increase,
I think
because you're,
listeners will increase. There are a ton of people that started shows who may let it fall to the wayside because they have to go back to their vocation now, or and frankly, podcasting is hard. So there are a lot of people that go, screw this shit. Like, I'm not doing this, is too much.
Mhm.
But I think that people are loving these apps because You can have direct conversations with people. In that network executive, it could have taken me 17
Mhm.
emails and phone calls to find that top person, but
Right.
I was in the right room at the right time. All of a sudden, I have direct access to them because they've
Yeah.
heard me. Or I had one executive say, "Oh my gosh, I'm a big fan of your show. Thank you for what you do for our industry." Now,
Wow.
I'm in the thick of calling publicists at networks to get some jerk who's on The Bachelor. And so it can be very frustrating because, I'm like, you're talking to a wall. And I'm thinking, I couldn't get a 24-year-old who was a substitute teacher who wanted to go on The Bachelor. And now they're like a movie star in their own minds with all these Instagram followers. It can get frustrating. But then to hear that somebody who's a big time decision maker is saying, "Thank you for all you do." How would I have ever had that conversation if I had not been in
Right.
that room at that right time? So I think
Yeah.
I think less people are interested in scrolling through and looking at photos of people in bikinis on tropical getaways, and they
Right.
want to hear someone's voice. They want to hear the intent behind it. And I think there are a lot of superstars in the audio platforms who no one knew about until the pandemic.
Right. Right. Well, and it's such a sticky type of interaction, as you said, because you really do get to know somebody in a way that you could follow them on Instagram for ages and not know them in the way
Yeah.
that you get to know them being in a room for a bit. So in terms of you and what you're going to be doing next, it sounds like you've got a lot of things that you're looking forward to doing and thinking about in the future. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Television producer. I want to continue making fantastic podcasts. I mean, I have so
Mhm.
many ideas I can't even begin to tell you. And honestly, at this point right now, I could see myself developing a podcast network for women,
Oh, I love
female
that.
voices. I could see myself doing that.
Hmm. I love it. Well, we'll have to keep updated on what you're doing. If people want to follow you
Mhm.
and hear all of your great recommendations, because I should also say that you put out recommendations every week about what to watch, what is the best way for people to follow you, Kate?
So you can listen to my show wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. It's called Reality Life with Kate Casey. You can find me on Twitter at Kate Casey. I tweet about shows and during shows all week long. Instagram at Kate Casey CA. The world is truly ending because I started TikTok. Oh my God. The TikToks, it's Kate Casey. I have the newsletter that comes out every Monday with my list of what to watch, and that's katecasey.substack.com. Clubhouse, I'm at Kate Casey, and I have a Patreon page for bonus episodes, and that's patreon.com/Kate Casey.
I love it. I love it. Well, everyone will have to check that out. And Kate, thank you so much for spending the time today. You have such a great perspective on things that I think people watch and do all the time. And I think people will get so much insight from this conversation. And I appreciate you doing it.
I'm grateful for your show and for the people that were kind enough to listen to this interview. And I'm so excited to hear about all the incredible women that listen to the show and what projects they're working on.